In today's episode of Today in World War II, February 7th, the RAF's famous legless ace joins the new Spitfire squadron. Uh, British and Australian troops trap 25,000 Italians. Rommel's counteroffensive retakes almost all the ground the Brits had taken just a few months previously. The Japanese in Guadalcanal complete their full evacuation, took all the remaining Japanese troops out of Guadalcanal. The Americans complete their invasion of the Marshall Islands in the Central Pacific. The RAF goes above and beyond the call of duty to save as many French women workers as possible before a bombing raid. And last but not least, the last major military power in the world declares war on Germany. Paraguay. Paraguay, yes. Well, let's get started. I'll explain more about that. Okay. On today's day, February 7th, 1940, Douglas Bader, he is the famous legless ace of the RAF. On this date, on February 7th, 1940, he joined the British 19th Squadron, flying Spitfires. From all the stories I read of the British aces in the Battle of Britain and before the Battle of Britain and then afterwards, pretty much they all said the same thing. Please let us fly Spitfires and not Hurricanes. Although, the Hurricane itself wasn't necessarily a bad plane at the time, but of course it was ideally suited to take out the bombers. The Spitfires were supposed to be the ones that were going fighter to fighter with the ME-109s at this time of the war. But you know how things are. First of all, they didn't send any Spitfires to France when the Germans invaded. It was all Hurricanes. And second of all, when you get in air battle, air combat, what's supposed to happen usually doesn't happen, and it's every man for himself with a wingman. Hopefully, if your wingman can stick with you. And Bader, as I've talked about in previous videos, was an amazingly inspirational character, and he was also a damn good pilot and a very good, probably even a better leader. And that was the fact that he was able to get back into Spitfires probably went a long way towards helping him get 22 victories before he was shot down, a little bit later in the war. But I don't want you to get shot down in life in general, whether it be in a Spitfire or trying to ask somebody out and they'd say no. Regardless, you're not going to get shot down if you subscribe to my channel and you click that bell that will notify you, or YouTube will notify you that I've dropped a new video, because that's only the smart thing to do, I think. On February 7th, 1941, we are continuing to follow Operation Compass, or as I call it, let's capture the Italians before they retreat too fast for us to get to them. In the Battle of Bet Affam in Libya, British and Australian forces were able to advance and flank them faster than they could retreat, and they trapped them at the end of the day, and they were able to uh, convince, at a point of a gun, 25,000 Italians to surrender. They also were able to get as part of the booty, they got 107 tanks and 93 artillery pieces. Pretty good score. I mean, the Italians weren't using the tanks and the guns anyway. They might as well let the British have it. Because let's face it, deep down inside, I don't think there was any love lost between the Germans and the Italians anyway, even though they were erstwhile allies. Italians just didn't have what it took. They were actually, as a general rule, peace-loving people and nice people, generous people, and they made there's a bad fit with the Germans and how bad they were. So this was just Operation Compass. It was a nice operation until the Germans got involved at the end. But right now it's still mostly Italian, so it was happy times for the British and the Commonwealth soldiers. It's always a happy time for me when my viewers will hit the like button, the thumbs up button, and leave a comment. And as I talk about this every single day, because consistency is all that matters in life. I'm consistently leaving you a message. Please do this because it will help the algorithm, help me. And by doing that, you're helping a poor soul who's not getting any money from this, but wants to get this content out there to people who are like-minded. Okay. On February 7th, 1942, General Rommel halted his counteroffensive near Gazala. If you remember, the Operation Compass was drawing to a close at the end of 1941, and the British had made some headway in Libya. They this is as far as they got in Operation Compass. Rommel was there as a new kid in town with an Africa Corps, the better general on their side, Rommel, than the British had on their side, better tanks, more motivated troops. Although the Allies were very motivated, but I don't know. The Africa Corps was a special force, and he started a limited counteroffensive in February, and well, actually into January, and in a little over 2 weeks, he retook almost all of the ground that the British Eighth Army had taken at the end of 1941. And this was going to be a continuation. This was going to continue as we're going to follow this in the next few videos about how the Germans were going to turn the tables on them and put the Allies on their heels and drive them all the way back to Egypt. And on February 7th, 1943, the Japanese completed Operation KE, and that meant that they got the last 1,796 Japanese soldiers off of Guadalcanal. They were evacuated by using 18 ships. Most of them were destroyers because slow transport ships were just, it was suicide to send them, as the American Cactus Air Force and the naval air units could attest that they were just sitting ducks. So this ended the last offensive area that the Japanese had tried. They got as far south as Guadalcanal, and then from then on, it was just a slow roll back, and it was all over for the shouting at that time. Stalingrad was the coup de grace for the Germans in Russia, although, in my opinion, once they didn't take Moscow, it was over anyway. Once all four carriers were destroyed in Midway, the war was significantly over for them as well. But I mean, the last offensive ability that they had, the Japanese had in the Pacific, was Guadalcanal, and this was it. This was the ignominious end of their dreams of their Pacific Empire. And on February 7th, 1944, if we jump ahead a year, on this date, the American troops, mostly Marines, but some Army, they completed the conquest of the Marshall Islands, of Kwajalein and Majuro atolls. Very few casualties. It was probably the easiest invasion that the Marines were going to have in the Pacific campaign, mostly because of the terrain and the fact they got smarter about setting up artillery on neighboring atolls that were uninhabited. And because there were no mountains, there were no caves, there were no subterranean defenses, it was much easier to blast away the Japanese defenders and make it easier for the invading Marines to come in and clean up. And on February 7th, 1944, a heartwarming story by the RAF, and I'm not making fun of this. Britain's famous RAF Squadron 617 was given the assignment of bombing a very important air engine plant at Limoges in mid-France. This was a delicate operation because the Brits knew there was about 500 French women, civilians, who were working at the plant, and it would, going in and slaughtering that many French women would have definite political consequences. So the RAF was given very strict instructions to not bomb until there was time enough for the women to be able to flee. And that's what they did. So imagine how difficult it would be to attack a heavily defended installation, with 88 millimeters guns, a different kind of ACAC, anti-aircraft guns, to attack one time. They flew over them twice and gave them, time for the French to flee. Once they saw once one of the crew member hit on the lead plane had said, "There they go, they're gone." That's when they attacked, and this was all recorded on film, by the way. The RAF had sent a film unit on board to make sure that that this happened. And then just before midnight, the Pathfinders came, put their markers right on top of the factory, and then the Lancasters came in with 1,200-pound bombs and destroyed most of it. So that was actually a very good raid by the RAF. Not as much collateral damage. And finally, on February 7th, 1945, the colossal military might of Paraguay declared war on Germany and Japan, mostly due to international pressure. They were, and let's face it, the South Americans at this time were very fascist. Most of the governments were fascist. They were sympathetic. Obviously, Spain, the colonial power, lots of ties left. They were, Franco was as a fascist. So there's a lot of support for the fascist. But at least they got on the winning side. What, 2 or 3 months before the end of the Euro war in Europe, 7 months before or 6 months before the end of the war in Japan. So thanks for nothing, Paraguay. And well, don't worry, they went above and beyond to help the fleeing Nazi war criminals settle in their territory, as well as Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay, and so on and so forth. So, not their best moments in history. Well, this was my best moment. I appreciate you watching this video. I can't wait to see you here.